When you think buying your first house is the beginning of a peaceful, independent life, that's exactly when the nightmare begins. The small house, with 2 floors and a dark, unfinished basement, seemed like a project at first, something that just needed a little work. But soon, it became a prison of fear. It all started one quiet evening when you went down to the basement to do some laundry. The dim light flickered weakly, casting long, eerie shadows over the dusty furniture and forgotten boxes. Then, out of the corner of your eye, you saw something move. Your heart stopped. Beneath the old, dust-covered table, there was a man, crouched down, his cold, dark eyes staring right at you. Frozen in shock, you watched as he started to move, slipping further into the darkness of the room. And then, the lights went out. Pitch black, suffocating silence. Your heart raced, the sound of his quiet footsteps echoing through the cold, damp basement. He wasn't supposed to be there. He shouldn't have been there. But now you realized, you weren't alone in that basement. Welcome to your worst nightmare. A couple of years ago, after graduating from college and living in an apartment for a few years, I finally bought my first house. It was somewhat small but had 2 floors and a basement. I got a pretty good deal on it because it needed a little bit of work, but over the first few months, I managed to make a lot of improvements. Anyway, one day after work, I was heading down to the basement to do some laundry. The basement was mostly unfinished, but I had some extra furniture and a few boxes stored down there. As I was passing through the main room of the basement on my way to the laundry room, I thought I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. I stopped in my tracks and looked over, then leaned down to get a better view. When I found the right angle, I saw that there was a man hiding underneath the table I had sitting in the basement. I must have been frozen in shock because it took me several seconds to process the fact that there was actually some random guy in my basement. The man made eye contact with me and then moved. He got up from underneath the table and ran into a nearby room. The next thing I knew, all of the lights went out and I couldn't see anything at all. I figured he had messed with the fuse box or something and switched off the power. I was literally blind in the dark. Unfortunately for me, I had left my phone upstairs charging, so I had no source of light. I was probably about 10 or 15 feet away from the stairs, and all I wanted to do was get out of the basement as quickly as possible. I started to slowly walk in what I thought was the direction of the stairs. It was eerily quiet down there, but then I heard the sound of movement from a distance. I couldn't tell exactly where it was coming from. I didn't know who this guy was or how he got into my house, but I was terrified that he might be dangerous. I moved quietly but picked up my pace toward the stairs. Just as I thought I was about to reach the steps, I tripped over something and fell. As soon as I hit the ground, I heard more movement, and this time, it sounded like the guy was getting closer to me. I decided to crawl toward the stairs, feeling my way around in the darkness. I constantly felt around for the steps, and soon I was able to find them. I began crawling up the stairs on my hands and knees. At last, I felt myself reach the door to the upstairs. I stood up to open the handle, but as I did, I suddenly felt my right ankle get grabbed. Whoever it was had grabbed my leg and pulled me back down to the ground. We started to go back down the stairs, and as this happened, I desperately kicked my legs around as fast as I could. I could feel the man grabbing at my legs, trying to get closer to me, trying to pull me down. I managed to get one really good kick in, and it seemed to hit him in the head. I felt his grip loosen, and I quickly kicked away and stood up. I opened the door without hesitation, slammed it shut behind me, and ran to grab my phone. Then, I rushed out the back door of the house and called the police. I didn't stop running until I was off my property and standing in the street. The police said they would have someone there within a few minutes. I kept moving away from the house, not wanting to risk seeing the man again. I didn't even care if he was still there when the police arrived. Sure enough, by the time the police got there, the man was gone, and my front door had been left wide open. I have no idea how that man got into my house or what he was doing down in my basement, but those were some of the most terrifying moments of my life. After that day, I became very careful about locking my doors, and I only stayed in that house for a few more months before deciding to move. This story happened many years ago when I was a kid. If I had to guess, I was maybe 10 years old. My family lived in a pretty average house in a large neighborhood. We had one level and a basement. I was always a little scared of the basement because, as a kid, It was usually dark down there, and overall, it just seemed scary to me. We didn't really use the basement much for anything other than storage, though we did have a small setup of an old couch and a couple of chairs with a TV, but it was only used occasionally. One night, when my parents were gone, it was just my older brother and me at home. I had to go down to the basement to get something, and as I opened the door to the dark basement, I immediately felt a bit scared. I ignored the feeling, though, turned on the light, and walked downstairs. As I got down there, I noticed that something looked different. When I got closer, I saw that all the furniture in the basement had been rearranged. It wasn't messed up or anything, but it looked like someone had moved everything to the other side of the room. I was startled and ran back upstairs. I asked my brother if he had rearranged things in the basement, and he shook his head and told me no. I told him to come downstairs and look with me, so we both went back down and saw that everything had been rearranged differently. My brother told me that he had just been down there the day before, and it wasn't like that. We both agreed that it was really strange, but figured our parents must have done it. When they got back home later that night, we asked them, but to our surprise, they said they hadn't moved anything at all. We all went back downstairs once again, and when we did, everything was back to normal. All the furniture and everything else was just the way it had been before. My dad walked around, checked everything, and said it all seemed to be perfectly in place. Nothing like that ever happened again, and my family only lived there for one more year before moving. Still, to this day, I've always wondered what exactly happened down there. A few years later, when I was in high school, I used to come home and play video games almost every day. I mainly played in the basement, where we had a pretty big TV, so I wouldn't bother my parents, who liked to watch TV upstairs when they got home from work. Our house was a split level, and our basement wasn't completely underground. Well, half of it was in the front, but in the back of the house, we had a sliding glass door that opened to the backyard. One day, when I got home from school, I immediately went to the basement to play video games, like always. Right away, I noticed that the sliding glass door was open just a little bit, and I could feel the cool air blowing inside. I went over and shut it, immediately wondering who had left the door open because I knew I hadn't. Then, I went to the couch and started gaming. I played video games until my parents got home and called me up for dinner. I ate with them, did my homework in my room, and went to bed, completely forgetting about the door being left open downstairs and not even mentioning it to my parents. The next day, though, when I got home from school, the door in the basement was open once again, but this time it was much wider. I also noticed that several things in the basement appeared to be messed up. A bad feeling washed over me, and I quickly ran upstairs to call my parents. They told me to call the police, so I did and then waited anxiously for them to arrive. When the police got there, they searched the entire house and the surrounding property, but nobody was found. It seemed clear that someone had been in our basement, but they must have left earlier that morning. While I was relieved that the person was gone, it was deeply unsettling to realize that whoever had been in our basement was likely in the house with us the entire night. After that incident, I couldn't stop thinking about the fact that someone had sneaked into our house and might have been with us the entire night. Every time I went down to the basement, a chill ran down my spine, as if someone was still watching me. My family decided to install a security system, and after a while, things started to feel normal again. But every creak of a door or step on those dark basement stairs would always remind me of that uneasy feeling. Sometimes, when I look out through the glass door, I still wonder if someone is out there, waiting for another chance to come back. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and leave a comment with your thoughts. And make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any more creepy tales. See you in the next video.